Well, g'day guys, and welcome to our fantastic live show. Head of the Yarra coming up a week away. Super excited. Got some great guests that I'll be introducing you to in one moment. But what I love about sport is the preemptive nerves, the anxiety, the stress, the fear, all of that stuff. And that's only now, let alone when the race starts. So welcome to, firstly, John Perry from Yarra Rowing Club. He's going to give us a rundown on all things Head of the Yarra. And, of course, great to have Jennifer on board, Jennifer Pollock from the Old Collegians up in Brisbane. Although Jen's been around a few different boat clubs over the journey and been around a long time, knows a lot more about it than me, that's for sure. John, welcome. Thanks for joining me.
Well, thank you very much for having me again, Guy. It's exciting to kick off a new season.
Oh, look, absolutely. And Jennifer, thank you for jumping in.
Pleasure.
Well, look, this is going to be exciting because, as I said, we've got, apart from the knowledge of you guys, we're going to be joined a little bit later by Catherine Ashley from the Head of the Yarra Committee. She's going to tell us about a few of the plans that they've got set up. And then we're going to have, of course, Rob Manning, who always tends to jump in. He loves a bit of a chat from Roman Repairs. And, of course, he'll be looking forward to this weekend because he probably gets a fair bit of work out of the Head of the Yarra. I'm wondering what his KPIs will be, but we'll ask him that very shortly. So let's start off, John. What can you tell me about the Head of the Yarra? I think you said just before we went live, you're competing this weekend and you haven't done it for how many years, was it?
Well, it's been 38 years since I last rode the Head of the Yarra, and which leads me to a quick interesting segue, because when I rode it 38 years ago, I was told it was 8.5 kilometres.
Yes.
But now with Google Maps and a bit of shortening of the course because of the Southeastern Freeway and taking a bend out of Skevies, I'm reliably told it's 8 kilometres only. So that's a bit of a myth I wanted to dispel right up front, that it's 8 kilometres, not 8.5 that you and I might remember, Guy, back in the day.
Yep. Yes, that's right. It was a lot harder back then, John.
Oh, it was 500 metres harder.
That extra distance is a world of pain. Especially when you're a school kid and you're doing it at a far higher rate than the current.
That's okay. But no, this Saturday is shaping up to be a fantastic day. It's going to be hot. It's going to be 35 degrees. The tide won't be favourable for records. So I don't think we're going to see any records in the female and men's Open 8, which was set back in 2015 on a raging incoming tide.
Yep.
High tide's at 9:45, so I think, give about half an hour of slack tide, the current's going to be going the other way with the other current. So
okay. So I'm glad you've answered that question. It saved me trying to work that one out myself.
So it's going to be hot. The tide won't be that favourable. The wind's not looking too bad. Might be about 10 knots of a northerly. So the only time that will come into play is that last corner around the Hawthorn Strait for the finish. So that could challenge a few people. But look, there's great entries. There's 267 eights competing. So that's, if my maths is correct, that's 2,136 athletes.
I'm assuming you used a calculator for that, John.
No, I actually looked at Rowing Manager. That's pretty close to a record, because 2019, I think, is the highest number of entries at 279. As you'll know, we missed a few years there with COVID and floods and the landing. So 267, that's pretty good. We're getting back up there. So all in all, I think it should be a great Saturday.
Just on that re-entries, and I'm looking at the entries, and event number 1 and 2 have 0 entries, and that's the male School 8 Open Division 1 and Open Division 2. There was 1 entry in the Year 10 Open Division 3, but that is scratched. So there is no schoolboy entries whatsoever. And on the female entries, there's only, over the 3 divisions, there's only about 5 entries over 3 divisions. What do you take away from that?
Well, I think it's representative of a pretty significant shift over the last decade in the Head of the Yarra. So if we go back a decade, Masters crews made up 42% of entries.
Oh, right.
They now make up 65%. So they've gone from less than half to 2/3 of the entries. The schools, on the other hand, 10 years ago nearly made up 20% of the entries. And this weekend they make up 3%.
Wow. So what do you...
But encouragingly, the clubs are up. The club participation. Right. So it's almost like we've lost the schools, but we've got a lot of masters and we've got a lot of, let's say, elite rowers.
Yeah, look, absolutely. I mean, there's plenty in the grade racing and the open. I mean, the male open 8 has 13 entries in it. Female open 8, 9 entries in it. So plenty at the pointy end. And
10 years ago, there was 5 open female 8s and 3 open men. So there's been a bit of a fundamental shift. I think from a school point of view, there's probably a number of things happening. One is the cost, and the programs are under increasing pressure for cost.
Yeah.
Boats do get a bit beaten up, to your joke about Robert Roman repairs.
Yes.
And also there's some competing regattas. So this weekend there's an APS regatta for the first time, which I think only the boys' schools have entered. There's a girls' regatta down in Geelong. So I just think there's a lot of competition now for the schools. And they probably think at the end of the day, 8-kilometre time trial where we could beat our boats up, does that fit into our training plan? It costs a lot of money. Let's go somewhere else. But encouraging, the elite rowers are up. I think we've got somewhere in the vicinity of 7 Paris Olympians rowing.
Oh, wow.
And there'll be heaps of former Olympians that I don't know the details of. But I think overall, schools are down, but I think that might just be a changing shift in the nature of the whole sport.
Yeah, well, it's funny you do mention the money thing, because I did have a lengthy chat to someone who I regularly chat to on this podcast, and he seems to be of the view that it is a financial thing. And I said, you can't tell me that an extra $30 or $40 seat entry affects schools with 30,000 plus a year tuition fees, but it affects budgets, and they are running on strict budgets, and if they can do other things, and as you said, boats. I think the other thing might well be is that they're stuck down there. Once they've done the race, they've either got a trailer out, which is an effort. I mean, I know they trailer elsewhere, which is an effort, or else they've got to wait to row out some hours later with all of us clowns having a bit of fun down at the finish line. So I can see there's multiple issues there with the school kids, but I certainly remember it when I was young as being one of those pots you absolutely wanted to win, and I'm yet to win one. But we wait anxiously.
Indeed, but to me, and the other thing is, it's one of the only 3 regattas on the Yarra for a year. So we've got the Melbourne Head, which was last weekend, Head of the Yarra this week, and Australian Henley. And it's an unbelievable spectacle. So I think we don't often see competitive rowing on the Yarra. We get the Australian boat race once every 2 years. I just think the weather's going to be great. It'll be a fantastic spectacle. And as I said, there's not much competitive rowing on the Yarra these days. So hopefully it's great for the rowers, but also the spectators.
Look, and especially great for coxswains. John, we're going to come back to you in a moment. But whilst we've hit this topic, no better person to speak to than Jennifer. So, Jen, tell me your experience with Head of the Yarra. I know you're a massive fan.
Oh, absolutely huge fan. As a coxswain, it's my target race of the year for lots of reasons. For a starter, coxswain, I believe, can make a difference in any race, but in Yarra, absolutely make a huge difference. And while we think it's about aggression and pushing and shoving and swearing and stuff, I actually don't think it is. It's about calm, control, really thinking about what's happening. And I think I told you last year there were several North Shore crews ended up in a mess in Big Bend, and I was talking to one of the coxswains and said, what happened? Did you not consider stopping before you ran into the other 4 boats? And she goes, but we had to go around the corner. So I think for a coxswain on the inside, like I showed my heart rate from the last one, they said that's as high as ours, meaning the rowers. And I went, sure. You're absolutely switched on. You've got 11 bridges. I don't know how many turns. all these crews, some that are more aggressive than others. And I was watching a YouTube clip the other night about two crews. One was overtaking the other, and the crew being overtaken's calling out yield. And I'm thinking, I'm not so sure that's the way the rules go. And then the other crew was yelling out yield. So they're both heading for the bridge, and they both wouldn't have fitted under the bridge, screaming out yield to each other. And think, well,
too busy focusing on that than worrying about a bit of safety or a bit of common sense. Sorry, I do have to just jump in briefly, because when you were talking about heart rate there a moment ago, I noticed John's reaction. I knew he wanted to jump in there straight away and talk about one of the things he's very fond about, no doubt, is the boat race, isn't it, John? You wanted to say something there, didn't you?
Well, no, I was just agreeing with Jen, because yes, indeed, I think Jasper Parrish's heart rate in that infamous boat race was up around 175, 180 from memory, Guy.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
Shows the passion and the energy that these coxers are putting into the race, which, Jen, I can imagine is exactly what's happening ahead of the Yarra with all the turns and bridges and the other crews.
Yeah, and I think for an interstate coxswain as well. So the first year I coxed it, my experience on the Yarra was sitting on a floor watching a video that one of the Sydney clubs had done with the GoPro up high, so you could see all of the landmarks and everything. And I watched it twice a day for the whole month before I went to Yarra. And
I know the YouTube footage you're talking about, because I also watched it too, even though I've been rowing up and down that strip for 40 years. But yes, I imagine as a interstate cox, it must be quite daunting, and all this fear of a big bend and all that sort of.
Yeah, and I think Big Bend, I don't understand what the big deal with Big Bend is. If you're a well-prepared coxswain, Big Bend is fine. There are other corners that are almost as challenging, and partly because they're not given the respect they deserve. There are a couple of pretty significant other bends where, if you're on the money, you should be in the right place before you start to turn into the corner. And also your bow too need to be on point as well, because you're going to be using them to either go in early or pull it around or do whatever you decide that you need to do. And you change it on the run. Like, we're talking about weather and tidal flow and stuff, and that's different every year.
Yep.
So you can go in thinking, I know what I did last year, but that doesn't mean that it will be exactly the same. And as a coxswain, I'm looking for, mind you, I want to beat you, Guy. I want to get the shortest course. That's my goal. And you're looking for the shortest course you can, the best turns, really smooth. Don't take run off the boat. You're looking at all of that. And then you're looking at, the first 300 meters to the first bridge, and then 1100 meters to the second bridge. There's so much activity going on, and you don't want your rowers to blow up either, because they're going to go out fully charged, and they've got a long way to go. So, it's a great race. I just love it.
Oh, absolutely. On that, I've got a few things here I wanted to ask you, and you sort of said the Big Bend, it's not a big issue, and I agree 100% with that. I think the Big Bend's a simple process. What is the one thing, if there is one thing on that course you fear? I have one thing that I fear, and I even go through it just about every session I'm on the water. What's the one thing you fear on that course?
I think you need to be very respectful of the Wallen Street Bridge.
And bingo, that was what I fear.
Yes. Partly because it's narrow, and that's okay, because you can line it up straight. But there's some form of an eddy or something in front of it, and you can be lined up and look at your crew and look back, and you're not lined up anymore.
No, it's instant. It's like a Bermuda Triangle of the race course. That thing, you just it's absolutely terrifying. And you go even as you're entering it, you still think, am I going to get through? Because you've got such little space on each side. And that's the big sigh of relief once you get through that damn thing. So I'm glad you said that, because that's certainly my biggest fear, and I even get nervous in training going through the damn thing.
Well, I actually find somewhere to practice beforehand that's really narrow. So the last few weeks as well, I'm very new to coxing old collegians, and I'm actually not coxing them in Yarra, unfortunately. Well, not unfortunately, I'm coxing a ladies' crew out of North Shore, which is where I've come from. But I was practicing not all clashing, but getting as close as I possibly could as a coxswain to another oar. Yes. And to buoys and stuff like that. So you really hone how
Yeah.
close you can do with confidence. But
Exactly.
yeah, my worst experience with the Wallen Street Bridge, we had a schoolgirl crew in front of us, and then we were the first men's, and I can't remember what division we were rowing, but first men's 8, and there were 2 right behind us. And the female coxswain for the schoolgirls crew just got scared and stopped right in front of the bridge. And we were full tilt behind them, and we would have overtaken them, except we got in the no overtaking zone before the Wallen Street Bridge. Yep. So I had to pull out a hard check, and then behind me, you had 2 hard checks from 2 other 8s come screaming down on this poor little girl.
Yep.
Yeah.
So coming back to your point earlier, which I'm an absolute avid believer in, as you said, calm and control, even though your heart rate's pumping around the max. In those situations, I always say before I get into the boat, if this is what happens, we remain calm and no one talks except for me, and we just deal with it. If we run into somebody else, no matter who's at fault, we just move through it nice and calm and relaxed. And that's a perfect example of that, isn't it? Wallen Street, I know some rowers get so, if they're held up by a second, they think their race is all over because of some little thing at Wallen Street Bridge, which is not at all true.
Yeah. And I think as well, like my stroke counts the bridges, the men's crew I coxed at North Shore. And he goes, do we need to slow down for this bridge? And I go, no, just full tilt. Let's go. We'll be fine.
Yep. Exactly right. I did love your comment before as well about bow pair. And on head racing, oh my God. And everyone goes, the bow pair, they don't do anything. But geez, if you don't have a bow pair, and we sometimes see this, and I don't want to sound controversial, but we sometimes get this in mixed boats where you might put the small ladies up in the bow pair and you go, well, how are we going to get around corners? You know, it is not a realistic situation, because bow pair, apart from obviously setting up timing, they're vital in helping you navigate.
Oh, I'm an absolutely huge fan of the bow fore. One of my most often calls are sharp in the bow fore. I want the front end of the boat light, so the engine room can power into a nice light bow end of the boat. Yeah. And as well, bow and 2, they can pull the boat around, but they can also go in just a little bit early if they want to tweak the bow of the boat around, and that can be really helpful. I aim to go into Big Bend when I hit the apex of Big Bend with no more than half the rudder on. So I've still got a lot of room to have different options. If you've got full rudder on when you're at halfway around Big Bend, you're in a bit of trouble. You're going to go wide.
Oh yeah.
When it tightens up. So I have points as well, and I think I've coxed Yarra about 6 or 7 times. And interestingly enough, with this weather, the bow guy and I always go to the coxswain's briefing, and it was years ago, and they were talking about extreme heat, and we're going, I wonder what that is. And then we looked at it, and I'm a academic, or kind of pracademic, so I looked up some papers on it and said it's actually the glycogen burn off, not dehydration, that you've got to manage. And the paper actually had a diet in it. So off we went, and I got to dinner, and the boys were really bitterly disappointed with what their choice of dinner was and what they had to drink. And then we controlled breakfast and what they did leading up to the race. And we ended up winning our division, but only because we managed the heat, and the other crew that we would never have beaten had to pull out heat stressed.
Wow.
So there's a lot, and I say Yarra's 50% luck. Like, it's 50% training, maybe 60, but I reckon it's 50-50, and the rest is luck. And they said, we didn't really deserve to win, and I went, we did, because as a crew we managed the whole event better than our competitors.
You always deserve to win. It doesn't matter what the situation is. You always deserve it. But yes, it is. Certainly luck comes into play, because you don't know what crews you're going to come up against, going into what corners. You may not have anything like the line you want to have, and you have to then deal with that and manage the next corner because you've been thrown out by the one before. So I think there's a lot of luck. And if we come down to that, the GPS tracker thing, and you might have the shortest line, but you've got to get a lot of luck to get that line.
And a lot of freedom. Like, if you start in the front of the pack, and you can keep your competitors behind you, but you don't start to row through. Because I was looking at one of the races that one of the crews are in, and I went, wow, they're going to row through the next division, and that's going to be really complex to do that. And while I'm certainly assertive I used to be aggressive, but I managed to modify that into assertion. There's a point where that's not productive for anybody because it also loses focus of the rowers. So I need to do what I need to do, and I need to know that my rowers totally trust what I'm going to do.
Yep, absolutely. So you've just hit my next point I was going to bring up, and we've got other people to chat to. So I mean, we could go for 2 hours on this, couldn't we? But what's the number one, or what's the top 2 qualities that you want from your crew, especially on something like ahead of the Yarra Day? I think you've hit one of them already there with the word trust, because that's certainly on my top 2. But what else would you ideally want from your crew on ahead of the Yarra Day?
I think discipline. So like I think I mentioned off air that the new crew I was coxing, one of the new ones, had a bit of a fight halfway through a race, and their splits went from 205 to 235. And while it didn't really matter then, Yarra is so important and everybody trains for it for such a long time. And the coxswains, like I, spend a full month just prepping for Yarra on and off the water. So I expect discipline. So silence in the boat, do exactly what you're asked to do when you're asked to do it, be supportive, and just focus on doing your best. So
in our previous podcast we've done together, you were very strong on that discipline aspect, and from the minute of getting in the boat at training, or even getting to the boat sheds and so forth. And look, it's 100% right what you're saying there. I agree completely. I've got another word I like to use, and this is where I had, because I'll be coxing Sandy Bay from Tasmania again this year, and we came second last year. But the one thing I loved about them is they had trust, because they didn't know me. They had trust and faith in what I was doing. But the one thing that I loved is that they were very responsive. And we came through 5 crews last year, and I got an absolutely ripper line because they were responsive to every move I needed to do to get myself positioned on all of the bends. So I didn't get held up in one. I went around 2 crews on the big bend on the inside of them.
I thought we weren't allowed to do that.
Yeah, what? Of course you are. And so long, they were in the bank. It's a bit different. But long story short is they were responsive into when I was asking for moves within 2K of the race. They weren't worrying about I've got 6 to go like many rowers will be on Saturday. They won't be thinking, oh, I'm going to work hard to get around this crew. They'll be thinking, oh, geez, I've got 6K to go. I better save a little bit. Whereas these guys, you can see them. You know how hard they're working. And within 2K in, they're working to get around boats to get to a position where I needed to be in order to save them time as well, of course. And that was, that's that responsive behaviour you sort of want from them. And I think that's, so my 2 things there was I have responsiveness and trust, which one could argue that discipline is exactly the same thing, because they've got to have the discipline to do the work when you're yelling at them to do it, not yelling, asking for them to respond to what you need.
Well, it is fairly loud when you're asking them to do it, I think.
Yeah.
I recorded, it was actually the time that we won our division. I still can't listen to it. I can't listen to what I was saying there. It was loud, and I didn't shut up, and there was so much happening. And I asked for feedback, and they said, no, it was exactly right, because you moderate it between telling them where they are, and I never tell them where they are before Big Bend, because they don't want to know.
No, it's just all bad. It's all bad news there. It's like, oh my God, still. But yeah.
Yeah, that's right. You go, we're 2Ks in, and it's hurting already, and they've got 6 to go. So I'll call splits. I'll call relationships to other crews, distances to bridges. They know what my race plan is before we go in, like where we're going to push off and what we're going to do. Sometimes I'll ask them as well, say we need to take this crew before the bridge. We've got 300 metres to do it. So
and that's that responsive thing, isn't it?
Yeah. And if we don't take them for the bridge, we're going to be held up through the bridge. So
look, and that's no good for anyone.
No.
They might get their microsecond of a break, but they're going to make it up later. But that's all. Now, John, I'm going to come back to you if I may. You're, as you said, rowing it for the first time in 38 years. Now, I'm not speaking out of school or nor embarrassing you, I'm sure, when I say this, but like myself, you get quite focused on a race, maybe a little bit anxious, a little bit nervous. How are you feeling ahead of Saturday?
Well, it's funny you say that because I've tried to determine I'm not going to think about it at all prior to the race. Having said that, I'm on a live podcast now. I know talking about it. I'm not going to think about it. I'm just literally, I'll just back the training, back the fitness, sit in the boat and go for it. Otherwise, I'm going to mind mess myself totally. So that's my approach to it this year. The previous head races this year, I have been a bit anxious about. Not Melbourne Head because I know that's doable. But Foot of the Goulburn twice, I was a bit anxious about.
Yeah, 2 in 1 day is a fair go at it. Yep.
But head of the Yarra, I'm thinking, I've got to not think about it, stay hydrated, have the energy in the tank, and then just breathe.
Just to clarify, John, hydrated, you are talking about water and so forth before the race, not hydrated after?
Well, both actually. Rehydration. But no, I'm just, from a rowing point of view, I want to enjoy it and I don't want to mind mess myself. So I'm literally, my plan of attack is not to think about it. We've got training the next couple of days. But turn up Saturday, I think we're off at 11, hydrated, enough energy in the tank, and just breathe from the first stroke, and away we go.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, I can say firsthand, I know your fitness level, having literally had you on ergos for about the last 3.5 years since the start of COVID, and you've been an absolute stickler for following the training. So I don't think you got too much to worry about personally.
Oh, no, thank you for that, Guy. But, I'm looking forward to it. I'm actually really looking forward to it because last year I was part of the Hawthorn Rowing Club team and the interviewing rowers when they came off the water. And what surprised me, I think the rowers finish, I haven't done it for 38 years, but they seem to finish, and it takes about 20 minutes for them to come back to the staging.
Yep.
And pretty much everyone that I interviewed, they were just beaming. They seemed to be so positive and delighted that they'd done it. They were so happy to talk. And I just thought, how fantastic that, they didn't say that was dreadful, that was horrendous. They just seemed to be beaming that we got through it. It was fantastic. And I probably interviewed a dozen rowers at the end of their races, and every one of them, as I said, just seemed to be delighted. So that, combined with the fact I know I've done it once before, a long time ago, I'm really looking forward to it.
Well, the other thing too, you've got the hometown benefit of knowing, you can break it down mentally bend by bend, and I'm sure that's what your coxswain will be doing, and that's one of the things that as locals, Jen, you might miss out a little bit, although you've done it plenty of times and seen on YouTube. But when we're up and down that thing non-stop, it makes it. We've definitely got a massive advantage, I would say, but it still seems to be the Interstate has always sort us out.
And it's funny. Sorry, Jen.
I was going to say one of my advice to Interstate coxswains is find out the crew in front of you and where they come from, and if they're a Melbourne crew, then it's probably a good idea to follow them until you they're going to have the line. You don't need to figure it out for yourself. Yeah.
Now I'll have to remember that. Now, what crew are you in? But that absolutely makes a point. Just so coming back to you there, John, briefly on that the point when you're doing the commentary at the finish line, and this is leading into bringing Catherine on board. But following on from that, everyone's in such an upbeat state of mind, aren't they, down there? And I certainly noticed it myself as well. By the time they are coming off the water, the heart rate's dropped from about 480 down to a meagre 85. But they all seem to have forgotten the pain that they've just gone through 20 minutes earlier, and it's all fun and games now because they've just done it. And especially those crews, the interstate ones that have been working hard for some months, focusing on this one day, and then once they've achieved that goal, it's like running a marathon. You get to that finish line, it's like, wow, it doesn't matter win, lose or draw at that point. You're through it and you've achieved something.
Well, very much so, and I think that probably shows the fitness of these athletes in terms of, they get back to their resting heart rate pretty quickly. The other thing I found interesting about talking to them was that, to your point, the Masters rowers have been training for this for quite some time, and it seemed to be almost a celebration of the end of a period of training, and that was the end of the year. But then when I spoke to a couple of the elite rowers, and where does this fit into your training program, they're like, well, actually, this is the start of our season. This is this, I think, to get the fitness up, to have a really hard hit out, and then obviously go into the 2K part of the year. So there seemed to be a difference between the Interstate Masters cruise, saying, we've trained a long time and this is almost a celebration, versus
yes. This is the start, and hence the whole reason why globally, they do head racing ahead of the straight line racing. It's to do your training. It's to do the hard yards first, and to get some distance into the legs and so forth. And hence why it is so successful as an event as well. But you're right, because a lot of the Masters focus on this. But even though they might have a bit of a break from here through the Christmas period, they'll be back with something in their legs that they will still benefit from, even if they do tune off for a month, coming up to Christmas, which many do, of course. Anyway, now, go on.
I was just saying,
you go.
Thing to note, I think, is a strong interstate representation in this regatta. With the top 3 club entries are all interstate clubs. Toowong's got 15 crews, Leichhardt's got 13, Commercial out of Brisbane's got 13. The highest entries from a Victorian club are both MUBC and Merck's at 11.
Yeah, right.
So just the support that this regatta's got from interstate crews. I did read something coming across the head of the Yarra website saying 75% of crews are interstate. I might challenge that, but it just when the top 3 entries per clubs are all from Brisbane and Sydney, it just shows really how significant this regatta is seen around Australia, and not just amongst Melbourne and Victorian crews.
Well, only six out of the 13 male Open 8 are local, so that's less than 50%. My mathematics isn't brilliant, but I think it's good enough for that. And of the female crews, just looking at it now, there's 1, 2, 3 out of the 9. There is a composite one there that's a bit half and half, but 3 out of the 9 local crews. So at the pointy end, it is dominated by the interstate crews, which is great to see. Anyway, moving on to an exciting part. Catherine's been in the green room for the last 40 minutes or whatever it is, taking advantage of our lobster and champagne in there. So hopefully she hasn't had too many of those. But bringing her out onto the stage now, Catherine from the head of the Yarra Committee and Hawthorn Rowing Club. Welcome, Catherine. Thanks for joining me.
Oh, thank you for having me. Actually, it's really amazing hearing all this technical coxing talk. It's very inspiring, but I must admit I got a bit nervous and excited, even though I'm not rowing. So, it's quite a course. It's very challenging, and there's clearly, a tremendous amount of skill involved. So it's a very, very exciting race, not just to row, but I think, to have any part of, just because that these are amazing athletes, amazing coxers, and a highly skilled event. So very, very inspiring.
You have had a little bit of experience, to be fair, on the coxing side. Am I right in saying the first race you coxed was Melbourne Head last year? Is that right? In a race?
Yeah, I think it might have been the year before, actually, but yes. The first time I coxed an 8. Yes, it was Melbourne. It was Melbourne Head. Yes, absolutely.
So straight into a head race as a beginner cox. It's all part of the fun, isn't it? Well, head of the Yarra is probably not the first one you'd want as a beginner cox, but it's
that bridge terrifies me. I do sometimes cox the Hawthorn Women's 8 through that bridge, and I almost close my eyes and start praying because it's so terrifying.
Oh, absolutely.
Although now, I don't think it's recommended for a cox to have their eyes closed in general.
Oh, well, it might save this. You can't not see it, but you can hear it if the impact happens, and it's not a nice sound. That's for sure, having experienced it numerous times, the grinding and crunching of metal and fiberglass and Kevlar and whatever. Not a great thing to have to endure.
Might open your eyes at that point.
No, and also, can safely say that the Hawthorn 8 on its maiden voyage down at the bar when I crashed it on day one. So, you know, so it happens to all of us, doesn't it, Jen?
It sure does. Yep.
Now, Catherine, tell me, you've been doing a lot of work on the Head of the Yarra Committee, focusing on the start line in particular and trying to get a bit of a vibe going on there. What can you tell us about what you're doing there?
Well, you talked about the finish line and the great atmosphere there, and it is an amazing atmosphere at the finish line. So I encourage anyone to hang around and stay a while there. It's pretty amazing. But there's a pretty amazing atmosphere at the start line as well. It's different because people are obviously very nervous, but they're also very excited. They're looking forward to what's ahead and obviously also terrified. And there's quite a lot of spectators. There's family and friends come down. There's also tourists just wander around and locals who love rowing. So there's actually more atmosphere at the start than perhaps you might think. And we thought, well, let's do something with that this year. So we're putting on a bit more stuff this year. We've actually teamed up with our friends at Banks Rowing Club and Richmond Rowing Club. We're going to offer they're going to offer food, which will be fantastic. We'll have coffee, of course, as we always do. There'll be rowing merchandise there. So we've got 776 BC coming in, and we'll also be selling souvenir Head of the Yarra t-shirts. And we've got a big selfie wall because it was fantastic. So many people were wanting photos last year, and I actually took quite a few of those photos. I'm not a great photographer, but I'll do my best. So this year we've actually got a selfie wall for those people. So you can go and line up in your position in the boat and get a photo with your crew, or if you're just there to spectate, just come and get the logos in the background. So yeah, a bit of fun. And we've also got some roaming reporters this year. So I did this job with Julie Cochin last year, but we were a bit part-time because we were split between the start line and the finish line. This year we've got full-time reporters stationed on the start line. So we're hoping people will be happy to be interviewed and photographed and form part of our Facebook feed and our Instagram feed, and we're even going to include them in our live feed. So several of the interviews, and I don't know which ones yet because it depends who agrees to be interviewed, but they'll actually form part of the live stream broadcast of the race, which will be fun. It'll be really exciting.
Excellent. Can you tell us who's helping you out on that front as far as the interviewing is concerned?
Yes. So at the start line, we've got Grace Patrick and Julie Wilson. They'll be our roving reporters at the start line, but they'll be working really closely with an absolute legend of commentating, and you would know that's Peter Landy, who works with a Hawthorn legend, John Stewart, known to his friends and rowing mates as JB. And this year, actually, we've also got Richard Dorstein on board. So you'd know him from the RV regattas. He has a fantastic way of making, every race sound exciting. And if people are, coming close at the finish, you feel like you're at an international event. So he'll bring a lot of knowledge and, expertise and it's a really great addition to the team this year.
No, he certainly knows his stuff, that's for sure. That'd be great to see all that unfold. We're really looking forward to it. We're very excited. It'll be a great event this year. And as John said, we've got a lot of entries. It's as popular as ever. We've got people looking at it from all over the world. It really is an event we can be very proud of, and I think all of us at Hawthorn Rowing Club do feel very proud of it. And the gods look like they're going to play nicely too. By the sound of the weather, looks to be absolutely spot on.
Yeah, a little bit hot, but I was really interested, Jenny, in what you said about preparation and it not necessarily just being about hydration. So I think there's some interesting messages in there. I'm actually involved in fitness training and sports training myself, so I would like to get a bit more information from you on that. So yeah, definitely, as well as all the fitness and technical skills, there are, nutrition and those sorts of things that you can bring to the event as well. So yeah, very, very professional from a lot of amateur crews.
Well, I think it's fair to say that that Head of the Yarra is taken very seriously by 90% of the entrants, if not 100% of the entrants, which is great. It just shows the event and how big it is really, and how iconic it's becoming. I don't know, John, have you done any research on this as far as how big it might be on international stage, the amount of eights that are competing? I'm not throwing you under the pump here. You can do a quick chatty G if you need, but have you got any? I mean, obviously there's other bigger regattas, but is the amount of eights that compete, where's it sit? Do you know?
It's a very good question. I might need to take that on notice, to be honest. Because I was thinking today about Head of the Charles, as obviously it's compared against the boat race, and it's significantly longer than some of those other, I guess, global head races that it's benchmarked with this. Because I think the Head of the Charles is 4.5, 5Ks. Boat race is about the same. Obviously, we're 8Ks, but I might need to take that question on notice in terms of how many eights would compete in the Head of the Charles. I know how many eights compete in the.
Do you know it all?
I think there's 2 eights that compete in the boat race, but I'd have to double check.
Yeah, I think we do cover the boat race. Actually, that's not quite true, is it, John? There's more than 2 eights. What about the seconds and the male and the female?
You caught me out again. There's 4.
Yeah. Well, I thought you were across that. We did a very good live show ahead of the boat race, and you gave me a lot of information to find yourself coming unstuck on your own info.
I walked into that one, but no, it'd be interesting in benchmarking. I don't know, but I'll try and dig out that information.
Jen, you don't know the answer to that one?
No, the only international events that I love attending are just the World Masters, Rowing Masters. So Budapest was great. Didn't go to Germany this year, but absolutely going to Spain next year. Wouldn't miss it for anything. But apart from that, I'd love to race Head of the Charles, but that might be a year or so away. Yeah.
You know what I reckon would be another ripper to do would be Henley Masters.
Yeah. I think it
the problem
probably
is you
would.
get knocked out after one race and you have to go all the way home.
Yeah, the bumping thing, which is a race that you do bumps, like that scares me.
Yeah, no, that's different. So Henley Masters is the week after the Royal Henley. So you get the benefit of going and watching the real thing, and then they do it on the same course, but it's still only over a K. And it's the same thing. It's match racing, so you literally could go over and get knocked out in the first and turn around and come all the way home. But
yeah, we had one of our stroke and 7 from our senior women's crew went over as a pair, and they actually ended up winning. But they were looking at the course, and they said the float buoys for the tide and the current and all that kind of stuff just seemed a bit scary for me, all that kind of thing. Like poles and things don't bother me because I've coxed at North Shore, so 55 poles isn't a problem. But currents that are flowing in amongst the way they had Henley set up. But yeah, it'd be good fun. But I wanted to really quickly go back to what we were talking about with not only being hydration. I actually think a coxswain's got a duty of care. So when Catherine was talking about it and the bowman and I came away and I went, geez, my stroke's like nearly 70 and he smokes and it's going to be 40 degrees and like we need to keep them safe. Yeah, they're going to punish themselves, and I make sure I know where all the medic stops are and all that kind of thing. But we have a duty of care to look at the whole race in its entirety and know what the strengths and weaknesses are of each of our rowers in the boat as well, and know what to look out for if they're becoming duressed and then managing that in the boat. I think that's really important as well.
I do like what you've just said there. I keep saying this, don't I, Jen? Because it's like you're hitting all the key points. I did on my podcast, there is a thing about what our number one job is, and that is safety. And so you've just hit the nail on the head with that one. I don't know, John, what Chris Wade's saying to put your foot in there, Mr. Perry, but he's having a bit of a dig at you, is he? I don't know what's going on there, but
I presume it's about only 2 boats in the boat race rather than 8.
Oh, right. Oh, I'll put your foot in it. Yeah. Sorry to bring that up again, John, but anyway. Yes. Oh, dear. But anyway, all a bit of the fun. Now, we are moving through time, 45 minutes. Rob Manning has obviously been tied up. He will be absolutely shattered to have missed this because he loves the opportunity for a bit of a chat. And I did want to question him about his KPIs of how many boats he's expecting to be binged up this time round. But you know, you just never know. You never know how it all unfolds. And as I said, he will be very disappointed he's missed it, but I'm sure we'll hear from him again very soon. And hopefully he doesn't get too busy over the next few days, because he does, as I said, he does love to have a chat on here. And he's actually quite informative. He not only would have rowed it himself in the day, but he certainly would have had many crews rowed over the years too. So he would have been quite insightful. But Rob, when you listen to this, you go, oh, damn, I forgot that, or I was too busy. But never mind. All good. What are we going to do? We should probably finish up. It has been 45 minutes. I absolutely have had a ball tonight chatting to you guys about it. Jen, very insightful, giving me some tips, which is great. I'll try not to use them against you, but we're not competing against each other, so it's all right.
We're not. I did try to pinch you, though, didn't I? I did try to pinch you for the crew.
Yeah, you did. Actually, it's funny. I have seen even just today comments going around, oh, we need a Cox. I'm like, well, you've left it a little bit late.
Yep.
Oh, dear. But anyway, it's all part of the fun. John, thank you very much for your insightful information as usual. It's always great getting you on board to fill us in on things that we don't know, even if you don't know how many people are in a boat race. But
well, no, thank you, Guy. And I'm gonna leave with a couple of predictions tonight, because
okay, good.
Reputation on the line as always.
Yep, good. Let's go.
Number one is the race record won't be broken, and the race record is in 2015, 24:40 for the men, 27:05 for the women as the race record. Right. 2015 incoming tide, that won't be beaten. And I'm going to go for MUBC women, MUBC men.
Oh, well, there's 2 Melbourne Uni men crews, so I assume you're referring to probably the second one.
I'll take the one with the Olympian as the Cox.
Yes. And other very fancied names on that entry list as well. I can certainly see. I do have a very close family friend who will be staying with us from the KND crew, who will be rowing, and he's represented our fine country, the under-23s, last year. So I might need to get a few beers into him on the Friday night, just to make sure he doesn't rattle up if they don't rack up any of the locals. But that's a good call.
Well, I think they'll be annoyed last year that Sydney got them. And I think James knows the river well, and he's a very competitive Cox, as we know. NBC, I think the women will want to make up for the Australian boat race as well, which they won last year. And I think, I'm going to go for the Quinella or the double. The Melbourne Uni Boat Club will win both the men's open and the women's open. And you can, if I ever come back to the show, you can tell me I'm right or wrong.
Well, look, I'd back you in on that. Although Sydney will be hard to beat, won't they, in the men's?
I think MUBC might get them, because I think Sydney Uni. Because I think at New South Wales States, Melbourne Uni beat Sydney, but Sydney Uni beat Melbourne, and Sydney got them obviously in the Australian boat race, which is
the Australian boat race. Yeah. But the Sydney Australian boat race is boring, just straight down a big bloody thing. I mean, it's much more exciting on the Yarra.
Absolutely.
Well, it's in Sydney Harbour though, and I think you get a bit of chop there, but it alternates between Sydney Harbour and Yarra, but it was in Sydney Harbour 3 weeks ago, I think. But no, that's my prediction, and and my other prediction is we'll finish, but I'm not sure we'll win in my crew.
Yep. So that will be just looking at that now. Are you in the E?
D.
Oh, here with the youngies, John. What's going on?
Well, I'm 55.
Yeah, he's one of the younger rugger. Here you go. Well, you've got a bit of competition. Just looking at that now. Waikato, you've got some international and Auckland. Oh, yeah, right. Well, there you go. There you go. Anyway, let's not get too bogged down in that. You've only got 13 other crews to beat, John. So best of luck doing that. I'm sure you'll be giving it your best. I know that's for sure. You've never been one to shy away from a bit of discomfort. Now, finishing off, Catherine, best of luck for everything coming together on race day with what you're doing down at the starting line. I'm sure it will all go smoothly and will be a great success.
Well, thank you very much, Guy, and thank you for having me on. I encourage everyone to just embrace the atmosphere at the start as much as the end. And if you're new to Head of the Yarra this year, welcome. We're really excited to see you.
Yeah, I'd love to actually. That'd be another interesting stat. John, I don't expect you to answer this one in the slightest, but I wonder how many newbies there are at a Head of the Yarra. I think there's a lot of, regulars. I wonder how many newbies they have each year. There's probably a pretty small percentage, I would think. A few dragged in off the bench from time to time, but no, I'm looking forward to it. And Jen, best of luck for your crew. And John, best of luck for your crew as well, of course. I know quite a few people in that boat that I'll be cheering along on the side. Well, I'm not sure if you're in before us or after us, but unfortunately, I won't be participating as productively at the finish line celebrations as you guys will. But I'm sure you'll have a great time. But just to finish up, we've gone through the 50-minute mark. I thought it'd be 30 or 40, but I knew it would go on. Again, thank you, everyone, for joining me. It's been absolutely brilliant. I've thoroughly enjoyed the information that I have been given from all of you guys. And again, Jen, thanks for all the tips as well. So on behalf of all of us, hopefully we'll do it again soon. If not before next year, we will find another event to have a chat about live, I am sure. Thank you for everyone tuning in, and for those that will be listening in due course. Of course, thanks Roman Repairs. Thank you to Crew Nerd. If you haven't tried Crew Nerd app, get on it. It's a ripper. It's a little bit less complex than the NK, but gives some really good stats. And also Gym 24/7 for those around Richmond area, Abbotsford. Get down to Gym 24/7. If you're rowing on the weekend, you might want to go into their recovery studio on Sunday. I've been in there a few times and put on the fancy boots and look silly, but it does work. So anyway, thank you, everyone. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you, guests. It's been fantastic.
Thanks, Guy.
Goodbye, all.
Thank you.
Good night.